much for me to handle.
Yeah.
And they finally, when I finally had guts to say it out loud, they just broke down crying, and they're like, "We see it too. We see it, Shannon. You're right. We just were afraid to say it because we didn't know either."
Yeah.
And so I had only raised enough money to do 80 treatments, because at that time I was paying $200 a treatment for hyperbarics. And so there was somebody at the hotel that I was staying at. The owner of the hotel said, "Why are you here?" And he would see me pushing Grace every day in her little pink wheelchair and to and from the center. And he said, "You know what? We're going to do a benefit for you here at the resort." And so he pulled together people in the business areas. Different people heard about it. Different Catholic schools heard about it. And kids were raising money for Grace to be able to stay longer and get the treatment. And then
truly saving grace.
Truly saving grace. Mm-hmm. And then our story she just kept getting better. And by Christmas time, we started hyperbarics on her 3rd birthday, which was March 6th. By Christmas time, my daughter's was already seen. Her vision was already restored. And we just continued, and to this date, I mean, Grace is now 12. She's off of all of her seizure medications, seizure free. Feeding tube is gone. When she was 7.5, around between 7 and 7.5, started walking. We just donated her wheelchair a couple of years ago, has never been back in it. And more importantly, I've heard my daughter say "mama," and my daughter looks at me when she says it. And we got her better enough to go to kindergarten. And that's kind of where our story takes a different type of turn, and how we got connected into autism community is that Grace never had any vaccines because of her mitochondrial disorder. And we got her better to go to school, and she ended up getting vaccinated, and she ended up getting 8 vaccines in one day. And within 3 months, my daughter would sit back in the corner and she would do this.
And you just got her all back.
Yeah, my instinct, I never thought about autism. My instinct was that her mitochondrial disease is out of remission. And I kept thinking, well, I got 3 more years from her that I ever thought that I would get, and I needed to be thankful for that. And I took her to the doctor, and they did all the mito tests. It was like, they're all fine. And they were watching Grace, and they're like, "We need to send you to this other person." And I look at the card, and I'm like, well, why do I need to see a psychologist? I don't know why, because that's what my background is. Yeah. And they're like, well, we think that Grace has autism. And I'm like, she can't have autism. I've been to every expert in the world. We've been to Mayo Clinic, New York, everywhere. And not one person ever said to me that Grace had autism. And then the physician said, well, she maybe didn't have it then, but she does have characteristics of it now.
How soon did you see it after the vaccination?
About 6 weeks, 3 to 6 weeks is when we were. 6 weeks is when I said enough. I need her to see the neurologist. I can't wait 3 months to see her. Mm-hmm. There's something going on, and I just, Grace is, regressing, and no longer would she look at me, and she started doing all these like clicking sounds and repetitive hand movement, and when she was doing this I thought they were seizures.
That's what you were used
right,
to.
because exactly. Mm-hmm. And then we got our autism diagnosis, and it kind of, I have to say, threw me for a loop. I was very bitter, very angry, not just at the physicians, but at God. Because I thought, really?
Yeah.
Seriously? Everything that this little kid has been through, and everything in our family's been through, and now this? And then I got angry and mad, and I'm like, you know what? It's not going to go down this way. This is not going to be the end for Grace. If she can overcome a terminal disease, I'll be damned if I let autism change things for her, and I'm going to get her back on the road to where she needs to be, because she was doing so phenomenal. I mean, talking and feeding herself and just doing all these things. And, and so we continued. I kind of got into the autism community, started other biomedical therapies, put her on the diet, started B12, continued with the hyperbarics. And, Grace is going to be a teenager next year. And, is she recovered? By no means is she recovered, but every day she continues to see improvement.
She's doing better and better and better.
Mm-hmm. And I hold a lot of that to the hyperbarics, because if I never had hyperbarics, Grace would have never even gotten to the point to be able even to have had the vaccines, or to get to the point, where she is today, regardless of all the things that have happened to her. I owe her life to the hyperbaric field.
And what do you do now?
Well, I've changed my profession, and now I'm a motivational speaker, and I run the International Hyperbaric Association, which is a nonprofit association. I fund research for hyperbaric therapy for off-label indications such as autism, cerebral palsy, Lyme's disease, chronic fatigue, stroke. And I founded 2 clinics. I found investors to build 2 clinics. They're called A Place of Grace. One's in Madison, Wisconsin, and one's in Irvine, California. And they're full-service hyperbaric clinics that offer not only hyperbarics, but nursing services, IV nutritionals, PT, OT, speech, marriage counseling, social skills groups, anything that I ever needed in my life are in the Place of Grace centers.
Are those nonprofits?
The centers are not nonprofits, no, but the Hope Fund and the IHA, they both are nonprofit.
Oh my goodness. I mean, listen, it's like I'm like speechless listening to your story, and the reason I love it so much, I don't love what Grace went through by any means, but it's so, you are such a strong, strong woman that when I look at you, I honestly think like you're put on this earth to be able to help so many of us out there. And I remember hearing your story. I remember it like it was yesterday, and I remember being so afraid, sitting in this huge auditorium. It felt like huge to me, and we're at Autism 1 and by myself, and my son's flapping, and he's running back around and, you know, not looking, not talking, and I'm hearing all these parents talk about all this stuff, and I swear it sounded as though they were exchanging chocolate chip cookie recipes because I did not know.
So overwhelming.
I had no idea what they were talking about, and here you come out on stage, and I hear Grace's story, and I think, oh my gosh, and here I'm listening, and you hear this ending, and you think, oh my gosh, it's great, and then you hear her getting vaccinated, and you think, oh no, you know, and then you hear her, she's getting better and better, and yet the one thing you did, you never gave up.
And you can't, and you know, my talk, when I give my, you know, I train physicians, but I also talk to parent support groups about not giving up, and my talk is called Hope and Possibilities, and I truly believe that if you don't have hope, you don't have anything. Mm-hmm. And, you know, any little bit of improvement that we get with our loved ones that have special needs is huge. Mm-hmm. You know, people don't really realize that it's huge when your child has a normal stool for the first time. As crazy as it sounds. Yeah. It's, you know, for Grace, it was every little step was a huge step to where this extraordinary little girl is today. And had I listened to mainstream physicians, had I listened to my family at that time, it wouldn't have turned out this way. And so I really try to empower parents to go with that inner gut feeling, mm-hmm. to go with it, and to understand there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. Mm-hmm. And in the beginning, there's going to be more downs and there's up, but that little bit of up you get is like...
You hold on to it.
Exactly. And that's what gets you through the plateaus. That's mm-hmm. what gets you through the declines, is that you know that your child has had that up. And, and if you don't hold on to that, you don't have anywhere to go mm-mm. except for down. And if you go down, then you don't have your child. And there's a lot of ramifications for not having your children that is going to impact your life forever. So it's worth all the tears. And I still have those days. I mean, I still have days where, you know, my older daughter is an avid volleyball player, and she's on a junior nationals team, and we're there and we're playing. And then on the next court next to her, when we were at the World Challenge, was the 12-year-olds. And they're little, and they're like Grace. And I just started crying, and Lily comes running off the court and is like, "What's wrong, Mama?" And I'm like, you know, it's the 12-year-old championship. And I'm thinking, that's what Grace would look like if she was normal. Mm-hmm. You know, the little pigtails and the spandex. And I envision that, and I keep that in my head, and that memory is as sad as I was like, you know what? Maybe someday that will be Grace playing volleyball. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to cry and feel sad that your mm-hmm. child is not at that point, or that your child doesn't get invited to birthday parties except for with your families. And, you know, it's okay. And it's really important that parents know that it's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to feel that you've lost something, because in the end, you have lost something. You have lost something that you never dreamed that you would ever lose when you first are starting a family. No, because you don't ever think of that, and you're not prepared for that. I don't think anything can prepare you for any of the challenges mm-mm. that you get, regardless if it's autism or Down syndrome or MIDO or whatever. Right. And, you know, and it takes parents like you really to that. I mean, because I know, because 7 years ago is when I got my diagnosis with my son, and there are good days. And when you just said the story about the 12-year-old, I can't tell you how many times I look at the 9-year-olds right now, mm-hmm. and I think, oh, he'd be talking about girls. He'd be wanting to do this, or he'd be wanting to do that. And
you know, I'm excited because he's potty trained, you know,
Right.
you know, and it just, I don't think people can really grasp it
No.
unless they live it.
And they can't.
And they can't. And but there's people like you and Grace, and when you say saving Grace, I feel like she's saving the Johns and